social movements.
Throughout the past century, social media has disrupted the traditional flow of information. Social media has transformed communication by allowing anyone with an account to post thoughts and opinions without verification. In the past, the news was not necessarily always accurate but could be filtered, edited, and presented in precise ways through the platforms of televisions and newspapers. The presentation of information was methodical with a focus on the potential public reaction to avoid societal consequences. The millennial generation has grown up aware of the accessibility and speed associated with posting through social media platforms. Statistics declare that 78% of millennials claim to visit social media platforms multiple times per day.
Media platform?
I definitely have.
Receive news on social media platforms.
Yes, Twitter.
Have you ever received news through social media?
I definitely have.
Social media lately? Via social media.
Yes.
Have you ever received news via social media?
Nudes?
News?
No.
Do you go on social media multiple times a day?
Yes, I do.
Multiple times a day?
Absolutely.
Platforms multiple times a day?
I do.
Do you go on social media multiple times a day?
Yes.
Multiple times a day?
Yes.
Times a day?
Yes.
Do you visit social media platforms multiple times a day?
Sure.
You read about a social movement through social media?
All the time.
Yeah?
Yes, I have.
Social movements via social media.
Yes.
Have you ever received news about a social movement through social media?
I sure have.
In the past century, it has been evident that social movement followers and advocates can derive from social media, but the results are not necessarily positive. It is essential when people choose to stand up for a cause that they gain an internal passion. Fake news traditionally originates from social media platforms and gains popularity instantly through reposts and likes.
Do you realize that the same level of oxytocin that is released on your wedding day is released when you get a like or a comment on your social media platforms?
This I'd probably get more oxytocin when I get a like.
Climate change has become a relevant household topic of conversation due to the apparent elevation in temperatures outside, but these conversations in many cases do not derive from general education or knowledge. In 2017, President Donald Trump decided to remove the United States from the Paris Climate Agreement because he felt as if the restriction of fossil fuel use was unfair to the United States. Unfair to the United States. President Donald Trump has presented himself as the Twitter president because he is constantly tweeting out all his unfiltered thoughts and opinions. During the presidential election, he presented an anti-environmental agenda and specifically declared that climate change was a hoax through speeches as well as online confirmation through a variety of tweets. He frequently confuses the terms global warming and climate change, which has been recognized by many individuals. These errors are consistent before and after his presidential election. Since entering office, President Donald Trump has tweeted fake news 183 times.
Is climate change scientific or political?
It's scientific.
Both.
Is climate change scientific or political?
Scientific.
Is climate change scientific or political?
It's literally science.
Is climate change political or scientific?
Scientific.
Is there a difference between the March for Science and the People's Climate Movement?
No, I think they're the same.
Is there a difference between the March for Science and the People's Climate Movement?
What?
It's between the March for Science and the People's Climate Movement.
Huh. I don't know. No.
In 2017, on the weekend of April 22nd, the March for Science began. Then the following weekend, on April 29th, the People's Climate March began. It is surprising that two seemingly similar marches have two separate events. However, they do not have the same stance on climate change. Paul Gatos, coordinator of the People's Climate Movement, states that the march goes far beyond basic climate science and that it is a political movement. Climate change should not be a political concern. The date of the People's Climate March was set to the 100th day of the new administration, with no regard for the election outcome. However, Gatos states that Trump's administration's dismissive attitude toward climate change and its effort to roll back multiple Obama-era environmental regulations have added fuel to the movement's urgency. The statement that Trump's administration's dismissive attitude towards climate change ended up adding fuel to the movement clearly asserts that the main concern of the movement is not climate change. The People's Climate March was a planned political event fueled by hatred towards Donald Trump, not scientific evidence. In comparison, the March for Science, which does not focus on political issues, did not receive as much social media presence except in comparison to the People's Climate Movement. Through social media platforms, the People's Climate Movement declared themselves as the main climate change march, encouraging all participants to attend their march if they could not make it to bold. In contrast, the March for Science planned their event after the inauguration, acting upon both the threat of climate change and the current administration's actions, not the social media appeal. This emphasizes the negative influences of social media on social movements. Social media as a tool for spreading information is detrimental because it polarizes the two sides of a movement instead of building a discussion for change intended. Fake news through social media platforms hinders the progress of social movements by distracting from goals. Dissent can move people to action, but without knowledge, there is nothing that can drive societal change.